Welcome to the Small Giants Fishbowl. This topic is scaling culture. Barrel Health founder Paul Spiegelman built a culture and family that transcended the standards of his industry. Then he sold the company and took on the challenge of taking the handbook that guided Barrel Health and translating it for a company almost 50 times the size of his previous one. How did the magic that drove Barrel Health fare inside the 13,000 employees and growing Stericycle? Join Paul Spiegelman, Chief Culture Officer of Stericycle and founder of the Small Giants community, for an intimate conversation about the realities of scaling culture, be it from 5 to 15 or 3 to 13,000. Okay, here we go.
Before we get started with Paul, I'd like to just take a moment to have everybody introduce themselves so we can know who we're talking with. And so let's go ahead and get started. Mark, if you can just give us 20, 30 seconds of your background.
Sure. Mark Zitter. I am serial entrepreneur. I own, currently run the Zitter Health Insights. It's about a $25 million, 70-person healthcare market research and data company selling subscription market research and data services to life science and managed care companies. Started another company recently, about 8 years ago, called Vital Decisions. That is a telephone counseling service for patients who are dying, and sold most of that to a private equity firm 2 years ago. Still own a little piece of it, but don't manage it at all. Live and work in the San Francisco area, and awesome. Know Semi-Freddy's and the owners there, actually. So.
Yeah, great guys. So,
yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Laura, can you hear us?
It was Lisa.
Lisa, I'm sorry.
Oh, Lisa. Hi, I'm Lisa Zuber. I am the caretaker of people and culture for Matawi Tile Works. We are located in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We produce and make beautiful tile, ceramic tile. Our founder, Noelle Matawi, founded our business in 1992 in her garage, and we now have 32 employees here. And I've only been a part of the company since August, but I'm really enjoying it here, and I'm very excited about being able to be part of this today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lisa. Chris.
I'm Chris Manley. I'm with Ingenious. We're a web design and marketing company for small businesses and nonprofits located in Greenville, South Carolina, where it is a balmy 40 degrees today. We got out of Ann Arbor just in time for the front to come through this time last week. So,
fantastic. Thank you, Chris. And to give you a heads up, Chris is actually going to be hosting a fishbowl for us about building community in January as a 36th birthday present to me. It's actually on January 15th. So I appreciate that, and I'll have to make sure folks get signed up for that and that comes along. Daniel, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, folks. I'm Daniel from Brazil. I think I'm farther away from you all. And I run CCLI. It's a language consultancy company. We help people develop their professional skills for dealing with international trade and also translation work. We've translated Paul's book into Portuguese, so that's one of my favorite piece of work.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic, thank you. We have Keith Squires and Betty Sullivan are going to be joining us, but for the time being, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Paul here in just a second. Quick little things on logistics. If you have a question, you can use the chat function on the bottom of the screen to shoot me a note to ask that if you just wanted to be asked later on. If we're experiencing audio issues with you, we may end up putting you on mute. If I end up doing that, I'll let you know that I am putting you on mute. And if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll get you worked into our stream. So while you're participating, we ask that you kind of focus in and you join us here. It's why you got to be all on screen. So if you're typing, we can hear it, and we promise not to call you out too loudly on that the first time. The second time, you get the wrath. I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Paul to start our discussion on scaling culture. So Paul, take it away.
Thank you, Glenn. It's great to see all you guys, and literally see all of you except Lisa. So good to be here. And I know that a few of you know a good part of my story, so I don't want to spend too much time on history. And even for those of you, a few of you who I saw at the most recent Small Giants Summit, there's been some really pretty interesting developments since then, which I'll be happy to bring you up to speed on. But the idea of scaling culture has obviously been one that's interested me for many years, as I was challenged with scaling a culture that started in a company with my two brothers and I, and then grew to about 400 people with Beryl Health. And my company, and Mark, I don't know if we've met before, but your background in healthcare, my company was a healthcare call center business, an outsourcer that provided services to hospitals all over the U.S., not focused in life science, not focused in managed care, but almost exclusively with acute care hospitals, where we provided services like physician referral programs and post-discharge calling and appointment setting, helping hospitals improve the patient experience outside of the four walls of the hospital. So started the business in Los Angeles in 1985, moved the business in the mid-90s to Texas near Dallas, and ultimately sold the business in 2012 to a large public company in healthcare services called Stericycle, and was able to take on a role with Stericycle, as Glenn said, as Chief Culture Officer, which is a title you don't hear a whole lot of, especially in the public company space. But it's enabled me to have the opportunity to try to translate what we've done in a small business in a very large business. And Stericycle today has about 16,000 what we call team members in 12 different countries, and very fast growth business. It's about 10 billion in market cap, about 3 billion in revenue. And it's also challenged as a company that does 30 to 40 acquisitions every year. So imagine having to integrate all of those new employees into the family and making them feel part of the family. I won't get into the why I sold and all of that. Happy to talk to anybody about that whole journey. But the question that I've had for myself and in business overall is, number one, can we really prove this relationship between culture and other business metrics? Not to say that culture is the right thing to do, because it is. To treat people well, to run a values-driven business. But does that truly impact the bottom line, and how do we measure and prove that? And I think that I can safely say from what I was able to do in my small company that we were able to show that. But I've also in my heart felt that culture and this relationship transcends size and industry and geography. And yet there's not a lot of data to really prove that connection. And if I could have the opportunity to someday tell the story that what works in small works for big, then I will feel like that maybe I've been able to make a contribution to the overall business world. And so I was kind of thrown into this big company situation, having never been part of or worked for a big company before. So when I joined Stericycle, it became pretty clear to me very quickly that managing the day-to-day of my company of Beryl Health and worrying about the P&L and what we'd sell next wasn't as interesting after 28 years. So working with the CEO of Stericycle, I was able to take on this new role. So the question was really, how do you scale the kinds of things that became so important to me? And I think that I could sum up the keys to culture in just a few areas. One is the whole idea of mission, vision, values. Do I feel that there's a purpose, that I'm here beyond just the job? Second is, do I feel valued in the work that I do, rewarded and recognized? And third is, to what extent do I feel like I have the opportunity to grow? And I think that is universal in any company, that people want those three things. But the challenge of doing it in a big company particularly a public company, is much different. So the question was, well, how do we do that? This was a company that is been very financially successful. So it's kind of a Wall Street darling on NASDAQ. If you looked at their stock returns over the years, they've been always going up, 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 and they continue to do so. So some would argue, why change? Why do anything? So this is not a turnaround story. It's not a company that's been down in the dumps, but it's achieved that financial success in a way that many companies do. Very lean, no perks, no training programs, no formal reward and recognition programs. I even asked Charlie, who had become the new CEO, if he knew what the core values of the business were, and he kind of searched around in his papers and tried to look it up on the intranet to see, but clearly it wasn't established. So what I have found, I believe, is that the same methodology that we use in our small company really seems to be working in a large company as well. And the question always is, how do we institutionalize this? How do we make it so this becomes part of our recipe for success? And in a company like Stericycle that's been around for 25 years, how do we prove to our team members that they should trust that this is not the flavor of the month, that this isn't some new initiative that we're going to take away? And I think that's something that we've been dealing with, honestly, as part of this journey. So now we're 2 years into it, or probably 18 months into the culture journey, 2 years since I sold my company. And one of the first things I did, as I would say to any even small company around the culture journey, is that the first thing that needs to be done is the establishment of the foundation of core values. And so I was able to pull together 40 leaders from all over the world into a room in Chicago for a couple of days to say, what is our vision? Are we a public company that acts like a holding company with a bunch of subsidiaries, which is the way we were currently acting, or do we want to be one company that stands for one thing? And everybody agreed on the latter, but didn't know how to articulate it. So we came up with a new purpose statement, a new future vision that put ourselves, 5-10 years out, and said, what do we look like? And then we came up with a list of 6 core values, and did it as a group. And as you know, these are ongoing processes, took weeks to kind of wordsmith all that, and then announce that to the organization, and didn't do it in a way where it was just an announcement, but made it a process that we're literally still going through today, where we put together a training manual, trained all of the almost 1,000 managers across the organization on not only how to put the posters up on the wall and give out t-shirts and pins, but to say, how do I live this on a day-to-day basis? How do I hire for core values? How do I fire based on values? How do I make decisions based on this every day? How do we tell stories? How do we do reward and recognition? And so that was really the first step. And then to try to institutionalize it in a way that it would stick. The second thing we did was to say, well, how do people feel about the organization today? And Stericycle had not done an employee engagement survey in 5 years. And from what I understood, the last time they did it, they never really did anything with the data. So had a little bit of a black eye from that. So we did a new updated survey, got a baseline around engagement. And that told us what we needed to focus on. And it was really those same areas that I just described that were the biggest challenges in the company, along with communication. And communication was a struggle because this is a very blue-collar company, disparate workforce. A third of our team members don't even have company email. They're truck drivers, they're plant workers. Stericycle's core business is actually disposing medical waste for hospitals and medical offices all over the world. They got into the patient communication business. They also do recall work for consumer products and medical devices and pharmaceuticals, but really a healthcare services business. So there's not a single platform on which to even communicate with everyone. And so we had to focus on communication in a big way. So once we had that baseline, we then started down the path and realized that we needed many more hands to help us, than could be accomplished by the small team we had in what we call the culture team. And the culture team is really me and 4 other full-time people that I have to work with to help shepherd these efforts going forward. But one of the things we did, and if you think about, you know, a small company, what we did in my small company is we established a culture committee, and we called the BBB, or the Better Barrel Bureau. Ended up being, you know, 60, 70 people in our company that took part in and helped run all of our culture programs. Well, at Stericycle, we have over 400 what we call culture ambassadors who work in the various locations, who are the liaison between the work that we do and the local markets, so that we can have ears to the ground, we can have local champions, we can understand what their challenges are, because culture really is local. And one thing that I realized and learned early on, that I could implement great new corporate programs, but what really matters to the frontline employee, it's what is my environment? Do I feel good about my relationship with my supervisor? Do I have the tools to do my job? And so a lot of that has to do with training the middle managers. And again, same thing I saw in my company is that we all kind of make this mistake, and we take these very good workers, we give them the title of manager, and then we don't necessarily give them the tools to be successful in a leadership role. We don't train them. We don't give them that kind of support that they need. And then we might blame them going down the road when things aren't going well, instead of looking in the mirror and realizing it's our fault because we didn't give them that attention. And Stericycle is no different. Many of the 1,000 managers and supervisors on the front line are that way. So much of our efforts have been around training and development of those people. So we started with the basics. We started, you know, how do we improve communication? Well, people didn't even know who our CEO was or the leadership team. So we do a lot of work in video. I have a full-time person on the team who does video work, so we can create video in a way that people can digest it. We set up a blog where the CEO does a monthly blog, and people can respond to something called Chat with Charlie, where they can anytime on our intranet ask him a question and he'll respond to it within 24 hours. That's been very effective. We started doing town hall meetings. So every quarter, he and I will go to a different location in the US and hold a town hall, videotape it, publish that. And probably the most successful thing we've done around communication is what we call Steri TV, which is a news style program that we shoot in Chicago. And it's about a 15-minute program that's done with a green screen, and we had auditions for my co-anchor, and we have somebody else come in every quarter, and it's very fun, and we do stories from the field, but ways to keep people up to date on what's going on in the business. And so we've created kind of this multi-channel approach to communication that we had hoped would get people much more in tune with who our leaders are, what they're about, what products and services we offer. You know, gosh, it's so hard to keep up with this big company and all the things that we do. So communication was obviously a big issue. We focused on that. And then reward and recognition, as I said, was another one. Reward and recognition, we decided to pilot through an online product called Achievers. And some of you may be familiar with it. It's kind of like an online Facebook that allowed us to reward and recognize people for the work they did every day. It's kind of a peer recognition platform. But the beauty of it is that people didn't need a company internet connection. So they could get to it from any smartphone or computer. And that's been something that's been very successful. And then in the training and development area, we established SteriU. Which was our methodology to help train and develop all of our team members, but starting with these frontline managers. So we started, for example, a series of webinars that were monthly webinars, all taught by our senior leadership team on some aspect of what it means to be a leader in an organization, how to lead by values, how to have tough conversations, you name it. So we've really tried to focus on these primary areas. and then provide the tools and resources necessary to improve the engagement of our team overall. And one of our goals is to become a Fortune 100 best place to work. So we know that's a several year journey. We know that it's not going to happen overnight. And so just to kind of bring you up to speed on the latest is that we just completed our second annual employee engagement survey, and we were able to determine, number one, have we moved the needle? And I was very proud to see that the overall engagement did go up, but more than that, we were able to see that the things that we worked on specifically had a major impact on the scores that we got. So, for example, things like I'm aware of all the services and products of the company, or I'm familiar with our vision, or I understand what the core values are. Things, they went up in double digits, 10 to 15%. Recognition and training and development went up. So all the areas that we focused on, we saw some great progress. Where we then saw the need to improve in this long journey was that the things that still really concern people are things that are more local. Do I have the specific training to do my job? Do I feel like I have open and honest conversations with my supervisor? Do I feel like we pay attention to the quality of the products that we have? So we felt good about our overall progress, and yet saw that now with 2 years of data, we might be able to convince some of the cynics, so to speak, who felt like, well, this is the soft stuff. We're so driven as a company, this doesn't really make sense to spend time on. And we still have those, and they exist in every organization. But now I've got 2 years worth of data to say, hey, look what's going on in this particular location. Look at the management scores that we have, and maybe we have some key managers who anecdotally we felt were probably not great managers, but now we have data to show that indeed we better start paying attention to this. We better have the courage to make some of these tougher decisions. And just in this last week, I was talking to some of the executives about the fact that we're going to have some of these tough conversations. And what you'll hear as well, I get that, but this person really has delivered results. Maybe we have a very high level sales leader that hits their numbers or exceeds them every quarter, but they're an asshole to deal with. So are we going to deal with that, or are we not? And I passed on an article that was in the New York Times recently called "Beware the Brilliant Jerk." And it talks about how, we all have them in our organization, the very smart people who contribute and deliver results, but almost single-handedly can bring down the culture of a team or an organization, and how we all have to have the courage to move those people out if we're ever going to make the real progress we want to make. So that's something that we're dealing with now. And then the last thing I'll say, and then just kind of wanted to open it up to discussion with everybody, is my real goal in my work, and certainly with Stericycle, is not to say we've made people happy, but to show that it's had an impact on all of our other business metrics. In other words, have we been able to show that improving engagement results in improved customer loyalty? Have we been able to show that improving engagement creates better financial results or reduces employee attrition? And as a very data-focused company, I'm fortunate that we have a tremendous amount of data. Not that it was all organized or all in the right place, but I just so happened that last week I was in Miami presenting to the Stericycle board. And it was the first time that I had the opportunity to start talking about whether there's an ROI of the work that we're doing. And I was pleased with the early data that we're seeing, and we had a bunch of financial analysts help me do this work, because I never could have done it myself, to do all of these correlations and try to see if there was a connection there. But just to give you a couple examples of what we saw. We had been tracking the cost of employee attrition at Stericycle. And you guys can go on the web, and there's all sorts of calculators that can be used to track employee attrition, whether it's exempt or non-exempt people, whether it's people that are here early, less than 90 days or more than 90 days. I mean, there's all sorts of ways to measure it. So we came up with a formula that we used in concert with our CFO to quantify the cost of attrition. And we did that last year and calculated that attrition costs Stericycle somewhere between $25 and $40 million a year. That's a really big number for any company. So we said, wow, if we could impact that, that's real dollars. And so far, in just the last year, our overall employee attrition, voluntary attrition, is down about 5%. And so we've been able to show a real savings of almost $2 million, which is direct to the bottom line just from employee attrition. Another example is that we looked at our engagement scores by location and we ranked them. So we took the top 10 locations in terms of employee engagement and found that 50% of those, or half of those locations, also were in the top 10 in terms of gross margin or profitability. So we're starting to see that if I'm running a location that's engaged, I'm going to make more money. And that's going to hopefully help convince that leader that this isn't just another thing to add to their job. It's going to help them. We're seeing a direct correlation between rising engagement and our customer loyalty scores. And I don't have a chart to show for you, but there's the one that I was most excited about was that some of you have heard me talk about this concept that I've been mentioning for years that we call the circle of growth. That simply says if as leaders we focus first and foremost on our people, that's going to drive customer loyalty. And if we get our customers to be loyal, that's going to drive profitability. And then we can return that back into our people, and that cycle simply continues. So this team of smart analysts ran some algorithms that said, okay, if we rank the people all in the top areas of a combination of employee attrition, customer loyalty, and margin, compare that to engagement, do we see a correlation? And they saw already about a 25% correlation there. So again, we're very early, but it was great to be able to share with a probably fairly cynical board of directors that this stuff really is starting to pay off for the business, and we expect to continue to do that. So my message there is really that it's very important to measure everything that we do. And the good news is that if as a company we set up the baselines correctly, we can measure these things over time and see where we need to course correct if possible. And one quick story I'll tell that shows how that the good work we do in any company can sometimes be like 2 steps forwards and 1 step back. We had a location. We have a location in Los Angeles, a plant with truck drivers, et cetera, and they have a weekly driver meeting. And I attended this meeting about a year ago in Los Angeles. It's always at 4 a.m. before the drivers go out on their shift. So as every company does, we go through times when we've got to scale back in some of our expenses and things. So at this particular driver meeting, they told the drivers that that this year they were going to have to tighten things up a little bit because it's a tough quarter, and that the traditional Thanksgiving pies that they had given to everybody were going to be eliminated. And turned out it was almost like a riot that morning, that these guys got so upset that the pies were going to be taken away. And one of them yelled out, said, you're telling me, you told us yesterday, or we saw that the stock price is $125, an all-time high, but you can't afford to give us a pie. Or you told us, you thanked us for participating in the engagement survey, but you can't afford to give us a pie. And what we saw was this example that messages that we can deliver, if not delivered in the right way, can tear down all the good work that we have done. And in this case, we had actually established culture budgets so that when times like this happened, those budgets wouldn't be touched. But these lower level managers ended up making decisions that are really not in the best interest of the company. So we all go through tough times, but I argue that when we go through tough times, if we do it in collaboration with our team, they'll do it with us. They'll help us get there. So lots of lesson learned there. But I think what I have learned overall is that we're not doing anything, or I'm not implementing anything any different than what we did in my small company. And when I hear companies that have 5 people or 10 or 30 and are wondering, well, how do we scale the culture and when we get to 50 people? And I'm dealing now with thousands of people, and I just got back from Europe, looking at the culture in the European countries. It's all the same thing. It's all the same thing that people want. It's just that we have to figure out how to create a recipe that can be institutionalized and make it not something that is a program or an initiative, but becomes who we are. So again, I can't say I'm an expert in anything except have the years of experience in trying to do this in different situations. So I'll stop there, but would love to hear what questions you guys have, or maybe there's even some challenges that you guys are dealing with in your companies today from a scaling culture perspective that we can talk about.
We'll go ahead and open things up. If there's anybody that wants to go ahead and contribute a question, feel free to speak up.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of tell my situation a little bit smaller. Culture came from me, but now I'm bigger, and finding that they're creating their own culture. And when I have meetings with them, momentum goes for a while, but it's hard to keep up the momentum for it. We did do a good program for a while, and this is an example called Appreciation in the Workplace. A great book that Paul White wrote. Languages of appreciation that helped for people to know each other, to be able to recognize them in the way they did. And we, in our employee surveys, we have high engagement, but our retention in some of our departments aren't very good. So it's kind of hard. We're kind of a smaller company. I think there's a little less than 100 people. So it's really kind of trying to get the buy-in. Some feel like, we need to do our job, and the value of spending time on that isn't great. And also getting them on the same page, to getting the buy-in from my managers even on their, our culture, I guess.
Yeah, you were breaking up a little bit at the beginning, but does anybody else want to chime in on that one before I give some perspective? Yeah, I think what you were saying was, and by the way, I'm not sure who just asked that question.
My name's Betty Sullivan. I have a company called Architectural Smith that sell tile commercially, and that's
okay. Well, to me, there's a couple issues. One is consistency. So we have to be very consistent in these efforts over time, or we lose the trust of our team. And that's what I have found, is that when we start things and take them away, then we lose credibility. And so we have very purposefully tried not to call these programs or initiatives, so that they don't have a beginning and they don't have an end. It really needs to become who we are. The second thing, and to me what actually sounds to be like the bigger challenge, is to get the buy-in from the managers in your company. And I think there's a couple different ways to do that. One is that we can't look at this as an additional thing to do. Well, we have work to do, so why should we spend time on this? To me, this is what leadership is about. This is a leadership imperative. This is my job. My job is to engage, motivate, train, and develop my team to be productive for the company. And if everybody feels like, all I need to be doing is just doing work to hit the target, then I think people are missing the boat. And so I think it's a leadership question. It's the difference between management and leadership, to know this is a part of my job. And if, like what we've done, and by no means are we finished with this, we are proving over time that if you're trying to hit a goal, the best way to get to that goal is to pay attention to your team, is to work on developing them, is to spend time getting to know them and showing that you care about them. and then you can track and show those results, then they're going to ultimately buy in. And then you're faced traditionally with the tough decision, which is, okay, I have some managers that just don't buy in. And are you willing to accept that, or are you and tolerate that, or are you going to make the tough decision to maybe move someone along or out, as the case may be? And lastly, I think that in any company, even a company with, in your case, 100 people, there are passionate champions in your midst, and they may not yet have been identified. You might even be surprised at those that would raise their hand to participate. But when you ask for those volunteers, you want to take advantage of that passion, let them run with it, give them the autonomy and the ability to organize themselves, and you'll really start to see these things pay off over time. But there has to be some accountability built in. And I'll tell you a story that I heard recently. I had about 100 of the Stericycle's leaders together, and a guy that runs an operation in the Northwest has been there 20 some years. And this stuff was not something that came easily or natural to him. But he bought into it and approached one of his plant managers and said, hey, you really need to start spending time on our people. You got to get to know them. You have to have the one-to-ones with them. You got to show that you care about them. And another month later, he said, so how's it going? And the guy says, well, I haven't really done anything about it. And another month later, he said, so, what are you doing around the culture stuff? And the plant manager said, well, I got to tell you, I just don't believe in it. I don't believe I need to necessarily be nice to my employees. I don't think I need to spend time with them. I'm just here to get a job done. And so this director had the guts to fire the guy on the spot. And that's not a decision that comes easily. And I was really proud that he did that. So it's got to come from the top, and it's got to be consistent. I don't know if anybody else has been through something similar or would like to chime in.
I think we actually just lost Betty there. So anybody have some thoughts they'd like to share?
Maybe I had a bad answer for her.
One question that I have is, it's more of when you're kind of on the fence and trying to figure out if there's somebody in your company that you're just not sure if they've captured the culture. There are times when they contribute to it. There are times when they take away from it. How do you try to coach that person to be a bigger proponent as a part of your team, rather than have to go down that road of actually removing that person and starting?
Yeah. Well, I think, Chris, there's a lot of those kinds of people in companies, and particularly in my company now, Stericycle. There's a lot of people who just naturally aren't even wired this way. And yet they're good people, they're strong, they're good leaders or managers. What I say is that not everybody has to participate in the same way, but they have to, number one, be supportive, right? They can't be a negative influencer. They can't be bad-mouthing this effort. That I wouldn't tolerate. But I do think you can coach someone into, one, convincing them why this kind of thing is important, and to do the basics, which is, I've got to listen to my team members. I have to carve out time with them. I remember visiting one of the plants in Texas a few months ago and talking to some of the workers. And I mean, you've got a woman who's sitting at the end of almost like in a assembly line. She's just cleaning waste bins, right? Well, what matters to her? What matters to her is, can I get a fan that keeps me cool in the summer? Or the guy that has to open up this manual door that opens the garage every day and says, I'd love to have that automatic door where I could just press a button. And, we had to teach leaders to actually sit down with their teams and say, look, especially after the survey went out, talk to us about what you need. What are the issues? And then be able to honestly say, that's something I think we can do, or this is something we can't do. Here's why, or this will have to wait till next year. And, we just realized there was so little dialogue that was going on. And I think you can teach those people over time. You know, the things that people sometimes get uncomfortable with is, you know, am I as the leader going to dress up on Halloween? You know, do I have to act like an idiot, like, you know, everybody else? Well, you don't. I mean, we're not telling you have to do that. It's more about just being supportive, and kind of coaching people over time. So I think I have found that most good leaders will be supportive, will be genuine, will participate to the extent that you'll be satisfied. It's the ones that are bad-mouthing it behind the scenes. Those are the ones that I think we have to spend time, you know, trying to manage or change.
Okay. Thanks.
Paul, I actually have another type of question. What I am starting to work on at Matawi is reinforcing what we call our Matawi Mojo, which is our values and mission. We really do not have a good way of orienting new employees as well as reinforcing that. We have started open book management, and we're doing huddles. We've been doing that for about 6 months now, and that's been one of the ways that we're doing it. But I guess I was wondering whether you had this, or Glenn, if through your organization, some pieces or models of how Small Giants have done orientation to reinforce their mojo. I was really interested in your training manual for the core values and how you put that together and who helped you do that. And I don't want to reinvent the wheel, so I was wondering if there were some pieces that you found that you could use, because I'm kind of the one-man show here.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you what we've done in that regard, and those are really important issues, particularly with new employees. But to the extent that you need to refresh the existing employees and make sure that everybody's on the same page, that's a worthwhile exercise too. So again, to me, it goes back to the recipe and the model, and the consistency. So, and these are things, by the way, I mean, for the smaller company stuff, like at Beryl Health, we had, you know, we didn't have a traditional employee manual. You know, our handbook was something that, you know, that you spent time with, that talked for the first, you know, 10 pages, not about rules of employment, but who are we? What's the story? How did we get started? Why are we part of something special? What's our culture like? And so we go out of our way for when somebody starts to make sure that that is what they hear first, and that message is delivered consistently, both, you know, verbally in meetings, as well as in things that they are asked to review and read in writing. And we're happy to share examples of that with you. I've talked about here at Stericycle how we acquire so many new companies and hire so many new people every year. Well, it's the same thing, and we've come up with a whole model that, you know, from day one when somebody starts, to integrate them into the family and into the culture. And it all starts with, you know, who are we? And telling that story. And some of it is just having the patience, because, you know, in this day and age, we get that budget to add the next new person. We just, you know, want to give them a computer and a phone and a desk and say, hey, good luck, go at it, instead of taking the time to sit back and saying, we're gonna make sure you know what you're a part of. I said we do videos. Well, gosh, I got a library of videos that are touching videos about what it means to be a part of the company, what our leaders are about, what they do in their personal lives. And we literally have a checklist to make sure that every new team member goes through that level of orientation. The fact that you're open book, and, you know, is one aspect of it, that the transparency around financials and the education. But I think that if you can document in the best way possible the story of the culture and why you're unique and special, then and do that internally. You asked, you know, who did all that stuff. I mean, all that stuff that we've done in both companies has been internally developed, because there's passion and creativity usually in every company, and then it's tweaked and shared over time. Anybody else done anything unique in that regard?
Chris, that's just you.
Okay.
Chris?
Yeah, that's something that frankly we're trying to work on right now. I mean, we just came back from Zingerman's last week, and I've actually got their whole staff guide, which is a totally different type thing than our handbook. I mean, our handbook, it was put together by the HR people, and it's in all caps for the first 10 pages. It yells at you, and that's something that we want to change, but we're still trying to kind of figure out how to incorporate that and really introduce people to our culture when they come on board, but also, we're also trying to figure out how to do that on a consistent basis too.
Yeah,
And I think the only thing I'd add to that too is that those kinds of things are so important that we want to try to change those as quickly as possible. And sometimes we take too long. We want it to be perfect. And I think the less formal, the better. So if we can come up with something that is a game changer, like a new manual, but not make it perfect, but have it start to deliver the message we want and then make it better as we go, then that's always better than trying to solve every problem, but actually not get something out there.
Yeah, and from the general Small Giants community perspective, for Chris and Lisa, there's a member discussion group that we put together on LinkedIn where you can ask anybody inside of the community specifically for best practices around issues like this, and they'll provide discussion impact, input to you, and you can connect with them that way. It's a protected space. It's private only to the members of the community. So I would highly suggest, and I can get anybody connected into that group, to put that question directly out there, specifically what you're looking for, and ask for best practices and tactics that people are using, and use that to not only get that insight in, but also create a dialogue with folks that are maybe outside of your industry, but that have strong practices that you can relate to.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was really looking for was some of their best practices and things that they've done. So I will definitely get on that LinkedIn discussion. And
if you want to shoot Glenn, or Glenn, if you have Lisa's email, I'm happy to send you soft copies of several things. One, the training, kind of the values training, manager training manual we developed for Stericycle, as well as the kind of the onboarding manual we developed at Beryl Health, and Steal Away. So that
would be wonderful. I would really, Glenn, you have my email, don't you? Or yes. I can resend you.
Yeah, something. I'll be able to get everybody that's participated in this call or in this forum the soft copy materials that Paul was talking about. So I'll work with you.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's great.
Awesome.
Okay. Any other thoughts you guys, or questions you guys have?
No, this has been great. Thank you.
Paul, one question that I have real quick is we're a small team. So I hear 300, I hear 16,000, and there are 10 of us. What are the best, you mentioned measurement, and I'm a big fan of measurement, but one of the challenges that I've found is how do you consistently measure culture adherence and core values adherence with such a small team? Yeah.
I think it's a great question. And I don't know what tools you're using now, if any. One of the things that you can use that has been used at companies of all sizes, very simple and free, is the Culture IQ test. That if you go to my website, paulspiegelman.com, just click on Culture IQ. It's a 2-minute 10-question test that any person can take that evaluates the culture in an organization, even a small one. And the other important thing about those 10 questions is those actually represent what I believe the 10 things are that we need to be working on. And so you could just, in the course of an hour, be able to get a sense of the 10 folks on your team. Because how does everybody feel about this stuff? You know, do we pay any attention to this? To what extent do we need to work on this going forward? And I think that, you know, an area that I always focus on is that in many businesses, and in your business, which is web design and, you know, all of that, look, all of our businesses could be considered kind of commoditized in some way or another. How do we really differentiate ourselves? And I believe culture is what you sell. So instead of selling what we do, we sell who we are. And so, you know, is there an opportunity to take even, I don't care if you're 10 people or 4 people, to articulate yourselves, you know, how do we make the world a better place? What do we stand for? And make sure that that is reflected in all the, not just the work you deliver, but how you sell and how you position yourselves. And you may already do that kind of work to help do that. But measuring, that's one way to do it. Obviously, just informally to measure not only how your team members feel, but, you know, your clients. You know, do you regularly measure your clients and how they feel, not just about what you deliver for them, but does your culture rub off on them in some way? And so for you, it's actually in a sense easier because you don't have to do many formal mechanisms. The question is this stuff we even talk about? And do we have open communication? And when we get to that 12th person or the 20th person, are we going to be able to articulate who we are in the same way that we're able to do today when we're smaller? And you may want to remain small, or you may want to scale and grow. I mean, that's all up to you.
Okay, well, that's it for this one. Check out more Fishbowls exclusively for the Small Giants community at smallgiants.org.